And I had this half-inch thick plan. And I wanted to do the Knowledge Quest Early Childhood Academy, the School Age Academy, which is our after school now. I had youth entrepreneurship, project money, micro enterprises owned and nurtured by entrepreneurial youth. I had adult entrepreneurship. I wanted to do housing. I wanted to do workforce development. I had about a half-inch thick plan. And this wise gentleman, he said, "Kid, why don't you find you one thing that you want to do out of all of this?" He said, "Do that well, and folks will be asking you to do other stuff."
Welcome to Pathbreakers, a podcast from the Kresge Foundation.
On each episode, we explore who has the power to shape a city. We're talking with change makers and city leaders who are tackling big problems in unexpected ways.
We'll learn more about the path-breaking work that they do, get into the nitty-gritty of how they get it done, and get some lessons from their playbook that you can implement in your own city. Hi, I'm Tracey Pearson, and I work on the communications team at the Kresge Foundation.
And I'm Tracey's co-host, Jamie Bennett. I work at the intersection of arts, culture, and equitable community development.
This is episode 2 of our Pathbreakers Memphis City series. And in Memphis, we're asking, what does it take to create a city with long-term family stability? A place where families can thrive for generations. Last week, we sat down with Memphis Mayor Paul Young and talked about his vision for long-term family stability in the city at large. This week, we're zooming way in to one particular neighborhood called South Memphis.
South Memphis is the neighborhood where today's guest, Marlon Foster, was born and raised. It's also where he founded Knowledge Quest, the organization he still runs. It's a nonprofit based in South Memphis, and it addresses pretty much all of the needs of the kids and families living there. They aim to break the cycle of generational poverty through a whole bunch of different programs that mitigate the effects of toxic stress and trauma on childhood development. They invest in education, wellness, economic mobility, and they do that for everyone in the neighborhood.
That's right. What I find so powerful about Knowledge Quest is that their approach is holistic. They start with the foundational belief that you cannot stabilize a child without stabilizing the family around that child. And families in South Memphis are working against a backdrop of challenges we see far too often in communities of color across this country. A history of disinvestment, higher rates of adverse childhood experiences, and some of the highest poverty rates in the city and state. So when we consider our central question for our Memphis series, what does it take to create a city where families can thrive for generations? Marlon's Knowledge Quest campus really is that question in action.
So let's get into it. Let's welcome Marlon Foster. Marlon, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Great to be here.
That's awesome. So tell us, where are you sitting right now? What room are you in? What building? What neighborhood? What street? Tell us where you are.
I am in the heart of South Memphis on Walker Avenue. It's the only neighborhood I've ever lived in, and it's where my house is. It's where the 3 Knowledge Quest sites are. It's where Lamona and College went to school. So, yeah, pretty tight context around here.
Yeah.
Love that.
Marlon, I've only been to Memphis one time. How do you describe Memphis for people that have never been there, or like myself, who've only been there one time, but you need to catch us up on how the city is and how you describe it?
Wow. In a word, I always say potential. If I was going to add a word, it would probably be legacy. Memphis is a great place. It's so communal. That's another great asset. Is literally, I used to say 2 degrees of separation. Now I say 1 degree. So we are, a pretty large city, kind of chooses to operate like a small town. There's some good and bad into that. But it's a place of awesome legacy when it comes to culture, when it comes to the political arena, when it comes to social justice, when it comes to civil rights, even when it comes to fine Southern cuisine, music. It's just a place that's really fun to reside in because you're surrounded by literally so much history and legacy and I think greatness.
Now let's talk about South Memphis. You mentioned earlier that you have lived in the same neighborhood your whole life, and that is South Memphis. What is so special about South Memphis specifically?
Wow, that's the heart of everything I just described. So, my grandparents moved here 1947, I think it was. My children are the fourth generation in the neighborhood. My wife's family, they came up from Mississippi. So we're both just two South Memphis kids. And
Mm.
folks often say, so glad, so good that you came back. We're like, hey, we never left. We both went to Lemoyne again. It's on the street. So it's that South Memphis is the heart and the center of all things that are great about Memphis. And what's really beautiful is that the community recognizes it and it carries that sort of legacy and honoring when it comes to this part of town.
It's beautiful. I love when the residents know what they have is special.
Yeah.
It makes you hold it in reverence for sure.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
before we get into the founding story of Knowledge Quest, I want to establish that what you are doing in your neighborhood is not typical redevelopment. You aren't trying to bring it up to attract outsiders. You're working to restore the neighborhood for the people who live there now to the stability, strength, and vibrancy it had when you were growing up there. And before that, when your parents were growing up there. Can you paint the picture for us, please, of what your neighborhood was like when you were a kid and how you felt it was working really well?
Yeah, you go back 54 this year, and every day I realize, that I can talk to someone that's 50 and they don't remember
Hmm.
things that I remember. And now I look back on my history really with a higher regard and really with a sense of responsibility. It was a community, for instance, where we still own the family home I was born in. It's the two streets made a T. Every single
Hmm.
house, there were three generations under one roof. And they had the wisdom of the grandparents right there in the house, with first cousins for me being raised like brothers and sisters. So it was very communal and tight. There was a sense of ownership, even when it came to the local economy. With black owned stores, predominantly African American neighborhood. The fruit man, I remember it was happened to be
Mm-hmm.
all gentlemen. So it was like the fruit man, it was the egg man, the
Mm-hmm.
vegetable cart, tamale man. Yeah, so all these folks, even the insurance man would come knock on your door, you know, but it was very communal. But like this insurance guy was a neighborhood guy. The teachers lived in the neighborhood, even down to the folks in the cafeteria on the janitorial staff. They were all neighbors. So this connection that we had was really about these multipliers of what I call social capital. So you think about that, there was also a sense of diversity. The black owned establishment, the white owned establishment,
Mm.
the Jewish establishment, and the Italian native establishment, all on one intersection. Some of that diversity has led to challenges in the past, like what inspired Ida B. Wells with her anti-lynching papers. So some of that diversity has been challenging in the past. In my parents' generation, things had settled, and it was more of a level of respect within that diversity. But being able to see that neighborhood level enterprise, families living above that store market that was underneath, that sense of authentic community. So that legacy is actually what I get excited about with Knowledge Quest because, every day I get a chance to experience that same level of these kind of layers of social interaction.
Yeah. When you were talking, that saying, and you were talking about your family being all in the house, I also grew up with my grandparents in my home, but if you can keep the family in the house, you can keep the house in the family.
I
And
like
I
that.
think going a layer above that is how important that is to the richness of a neighborhood. And so I want to ask you, when you were thinking about Knowledge Quest, and you talked a little bit about legacy too, what came together and spurred your interest or your motivation to start Knowledge Quest?
I wish I could say it was all intentional, but I was a business major at Lemoyne, and my desire was to start a neighborhood business.
Mm.
I had my model down. I knew what I wanted to do. But you're doing your marketing study, and just like with any business, and you're seeing, about what's going on, some of the statistics in your neighborhood, and here I am, kid, 21, 22 years old. I think I know everything. And like this reality check hit me like a boulder. Like, man, you don't even know what's happening right next door. I mean, ranked number one in all the wrong areas, as I would say back
Mm.
then. Any statistic you name. And for instance, with poverty, the average annual household income was $5,700 a
Mm.
year. Now I'm thinking I'm about to come out of B school. Oh, I might get that a month, but this reality check of any stat, even down to the lowest number of registered vehicles, highest poverty rate, lowest educational rates, highest change pregnancy rate. I mean, just every stat that I looked at. And I came out of that experience after a lot of reflection, and kind of landed on, all the challenges and opportunities that a young man like myself would want are right here in my neighborhood. So I put those entrepreneurial aspirations aside and I start saying, okay, I need to do something to build the neighborhood. And I had this half-inch thick plan. And I want to do the Knowledge Quest Early Childhood Academy, the School Age Academy, which is our after school now. I had youth entrepreneurship, Project Money, micro enterprises owned and nurtured by entrepreneurial youth. I had adult entrepreneurship. I wanted to do housing. I wanted to do workforce development. I had about a half-inch thick plan. And this wise gentleman, he said, kid, why don't you find you one thing that you want to do out of all of this? He said, do that well, and folks will be asking you to do other stuff. And for me, it really was a practical decision around starting with children. In my mind, if you start with the children, then you could kind of cut the faucet off, if you will, and we wouldn't have the challenges into adulthood. But for me, it was an end in and of itself, but it also was a means of building a community. And now, lo and behold, over 25 years later, we're actually doing all of those elements that I originally, envisioned back in 94, 95.
That's amazing. Do you still have that binder? Have you ticked through to see if you've gotten it all done?
I still have the file cabinet
Wow.
with all sorts of things. I'm real nostalgic like that.
Or historian.
Yeah. I still have the desk, So I gotta say,
I
my wife
love
got rid of my old chair. I'm like, I wanted that chair. Maybe if I want to have a room one day to reflect on and look at that old desk and chair. But yeah, it was literally me and a big family home. Tracey, you mentioned having that connection. Over time, the house got down to my grandmother and I after we lost my grandfather. And, so in that experience, I turned one of those bedrooms into my office. So folks that know the first couple of years of Knowledge Quest, I answered that second phone line. Good morning, you've reached Knowledge Quest. Nobody knew I was in the back room of my grandmother's house, but I knew this is what I was called to do. I had no doubt that my purpose was tied up into Knowledge Quest.
Well, and Marlon, over the past more than 25, you're coming up almost on 30 years
Yes.
of Knowledge Quest. You all have expanded a lot beyond that back bedroom. And even more than thinking of Knowledge Quest as an organization or business, I really think of it as a sort of 2-mile corridor. It's essentially a campus in South Memphis. Will you just sort of walk us through that? Give us a little bit of the campus tour. Tell us about sort of what is the physical footprint of Knowledge Quest.
You mentioned the 2-mile corridor. So Walker Avenue, historic Walker Avenue, comes to the heart of South Memphis. It runs about 2 miles. And to the western end, we have Knowledge Quest at Gaston Park, the city's first community center built by the same family that donated our first public hospital. And there we have after school, where we go from second grade through fifth grade. And there is a family stability center there that focuses on really economic stability for families, social and economic mobility, stability, where we're really trying to homeownership, entrepreneurship, just really trying to stabilize, income and revenue for families and build their wealth. And then you go about a half a mile down the road, our most humble campus is called our main campus. And there we have our early literacy academy, after school again, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. And there is also a Greenleaf Learning Farm, where we converted 30 formerly vacant blighted lots, 4 abandoned buildings, to Memphis's first USDA certified organic operation. And then you go a half a mile or so from that campus, and you have Knowledge Quest at College Park. And at that site, there's pre-K through 12th grade after school. There's an early childhood academy, full day 1, 2, 3, 4-year-olds. There's a Best Buy Teen Tech Center. And there's our Family Stability Center at that campus that really focuses around strengths-based mental health. So one-on-one sessions with a credentialed therapist, therapeutic groups, alternative therapies, where Memphis really was one of the first to really look at ACEs from a preventative lens. And we went with relationships of trust with one of our major hospitals, a hospital-based vision, and a community-based vision where Knowledge Quest was selected by the community to really get this vision off the ground. But we call that corridor, that vision of programming, those 4 programs, H2O. So home, health, and opportunity is how we frame that methodology of programming.
Well, so what are some of the highlights or tenets of that framework?
Think about with home. So we start with home in our Family Stability Center. Folks call it case management. We call it family coaching. But that's really around that family context. It's really around that economic mobility. If a family is really trying to, you got an associate's degree, but you want a bachelor's degree. You know how to paint, but you really want to now be formal and get a journeyman certification. That's really where we really focus in. Some families enter through really some emergency situations that are going on where they're really trying to stabilize their families. For others, they're trying to go from that B to an A level and really accelerate and really get their family on solid footing for the future. So that's matters of home. And then when it comes to health, so we do a lot of blending of physical health and mental health. So on the farm, there's yoga, Zumba, Tai Chi, that all happens in that context. Or we'll have a therapeutic group and it's around food and mood. And we highlight those connections around, again, physical health and mental health. And then the O is literally closing the opportunity gap. And in neighborhoods like South Memphis, the average investment outside of formal school is around $700. You know, a kid might be on the football team, you might be in the band, you might be a cheerleader. In not just wealthy neighborhoods, I mean, just a strong middle class, that number swells to about $11,000.
Wow.
Study abroad trips, additional ACT preps, ACT tutors. If you take lacrosse in a few select schools in Memphis, parents have to pay for that. So that gap we consider is called the opportunity gap. So we gather with children in about 6 areas, as early as 2nd grade. So visual arts, performing arts, creative writing and expression, STEM, sports, and urban agriculture. And we try to help a child tap into where they're leaning, where they find passion. We know that'll change, when they get to college or high school. But as early as that age, we try to pour a lot of investment. And it's all connected to where there is somewhat of a deficit now. So when we talk about the farm, in 2010, our children had the highest childhood hunger rate and the highest childhood obesity rate at the same time. So our response is we're not just going to have a community garden. We're going to have an urban farm now. And it's going to be, I told our team, of the most nutrient-dense crops, of the highest growing standards, and one of the most distinct food deserts in the nation, which is really a half a mile, but we're 3 miles from the closest full-service grocery store. When it came to technology, only 18% of the households in our neighborhood have hardline internet. When we jump to the next major zip code, it only swells to 23%. So this partnership with corporate folks like Best Buy was about, we're just not going to have some recycled computers. We need the latest forms of technology. So there's gaming, there's coding, there's, a recording studio, there's video, photography, podcasting. So we just believe in Knowledge Quest that the response has to be commensurate to the level of the challenge. So if you have those type of health challenges, you got to go all out on the other extreme to kind of bring things back to the middle. The same thing with the digital divide.
That's amazing. And Marlon, I want to go back for just a second. A couple minutes ago, you used the acronym ACEs, which sounds like a very positive word. But in this case, it's not so. Will you just tell us what ACEs are?
Yes, ACEs with adverse childhood experiences. And, that science with Dr. Vince Folletti. Dr. Folletti's science was really looking at, it's really this kind of forward-thinking science. He started really at a health clinic around weight loss. And they began to have therapy sessions, and I'm cutting across the field a little bit, but it was kept going back to how these childhood experiences, these adverse childhood experiences, really were some of the stimulants behind behavior into adulthood. And there are things like if you, with this ACE score, 10 questions that you really begin to look at your childhood, those who grew up with violence in the home, divorce, or like 40% times more likely to have a heart attack in your 40s. These type of stats were one of the first times these childhood experiences were connected to health indicators later in life. And again, Memphis, I must say, for our city, we were one of the first to really look at that. It was happening. We went to Philadelphia. That was ground zero for ACEs, for many acknowledge it as such. But it was a lot of heavy intervention. And we came back with a vision of saying, how can we start where there are communities and relationships of trust? How can we work with families and children to really help families understand their own experience, so then they might be more intentional with their childhood experience, with their children's experience,
Yep.
and to actually put in parenting tools and strategies and resources to kind of accentuate those strengths. And it was an investment. It still is an investment. When you're doing something today and you are trying to prepare for decades down the road. And I would challenge folks, we have to see this work around ACEs the same way we see the arts. We understand that the arts have a community benefit connection. We understand that an investment in the arts just will make us a better culture and community, more well-rounded. And I would challenge folks back then. Yes, I know we're talking 40 years down the road from this study, but those investments and that clock starts now. And we need to see this as a community investment, the same way we see other investments in trust, that the benefits will reveal themselves.
I know you're talking Jamie's language, and before I let him get started on the arts, I want to ask you about sort of like that two-gen child and parent approach that you've taken. So when a family is in crisis, whether that is housing instability, a financial crisis, or family members that are in distress, the parents' bandwidth for engagement can really shrink. It's not that they don't care, it's just a capacity thing. How do you tend to that? How do you help a parent understand that their healing and the work that they do on themselves can lead to their child's success? And all of that is really interdependent.
Yes, we say something around Knowledge Quest that community equals vulnerability. And I share with other champions of nonprofit organizations, you're only going to experience a level of community to the extent you're willing to be vulnerable. And that social capital, that relationship building, that's an everyday experience. We still walk the neighborhood. We have direct engagement, not just me, but from the directors that report to me down to our entry-level staff. Many live in a immediate neighborhood. So imagine relationships where we're together, from Sundays, at church together, to a Knowledge Quest during the week, to the grocery store, to sitting on the porch. So when you have these multi-layered relationships, those are those things that when families enter crisis, there's a level of comfort, there's a level of trust, where now this most vulnerable thing that's happening in my life, whether there's a death in my family, whether I'm about to be evicted, whether I'm just really need someone to talk to, it's that everyday work of relationship building that makes you a number that folks are willing to call, or a location that folks are willing to stop by in times of crisis.
Marlon, I want to go back for a second, because you also mentioned that Knowledge Quest owns a USDA certified organic farm, which is amazing and wonderful. It's a great chance to learn. It's a great chance to grow. But about a year ago, you all have also opened up a cafe where we sort of bring stuff out of the farm, put it in the kitchen, and have South Memphis residents serve it as part of a sort of workforce. So how has the past year been going? Tell us about the cafe. What's on the menu? What are Tracey and I going to have when we come down to Memphis next?
Yes, the cafe is off. If it was Tuesday, that would have been my breakfast. But the cafe, it is something, again, the perfect example of Knowledge Quest. The sous chef that runs the cafe and that leads our culinary academy. She was 13 years old when we started the culinary academy. Her family and she still lives in South Memphis. And, that story of now she leads that class with other high schoolers, that same class she was in, and she runs that cafe. So again, levels of relationship, this kind of time. But when you come there, I mean, we bring staples right from the farm. Our green leaf garden salad is one of our most popular dishes. Comes with blackened or grilled, shrimp, salmon,
Mm.
or chicken. But it's folks realize, and there's a farm stand that's there. So those caramelized onions that's on that salmon panini, you can buy one of those red onions right next door at this farm stand. So it becomes this communal experience where we went with a breakfast and lunch concept because you couldn't get a cup of coffee anywhere in South Memphis. We're
Mm.
Southern cuisine, soul food, lunch and dinner time with folks like Four-Way Grill and many others now. So there's an adjacent public park. So you imagine we partner with other therapists. We instead of sitting behind a desk and we're the all wise case manager with a clipboard. No, we're the family coach and we're just going to go on a walk. So we
Hmm.
walk in the adjacent park and really that therapeutic group, if you will, is happening as we go for a walk and they're discussing some meaningful issues. And now we've blended physical health, mental health, and we walk right across the street and we can get some fruit cups and light breakfast affair right there from the cafe. And we're underway right now, thanks to some American Cities practice actually, with the corner store. And it's going to be the Greenleaf Organic Market in Delhi.
Mm.
And then we'll have one final building after that we're working on. But this Delhi, it goes back to the neighborhood. Everything that I'm describing, the real answer is it's all me trying to relive those childhood experiences that I talked about at the onset of this conversation. So the model for that store is Jet's Food Fair. The vision is it's going to be a deli, just like the Jackson family had a deli. You could eat off the floor. It was
Yeah.
neighborhood owned and based. So my whole life is really I have the pleasure of having that worldview from 50 years ago and trying to relive those awesome experiences that I deemed that were so valuable to my childhood. And we're so excited about the cafe. That's yet another expression.
You've leaned into the concept of Sankofa, and you have really, in so many instances, gone back and gotten it for the kids today. Like you are living that and embodying that, and just congratulations to you for that.
So much of how you've described South Memphis has been almost intimate, right? Based in those sort of bonds of trust and affection, based in relationships, based in the people you know. South Memphis is also really important to the United States in terms of the history of the civil rights movement. And you mentioned the Four-Way Grill, which is an amazing restaurant. And it's also where a lot of civil rights leaders and political leaders came together to convene and have conversation. You mentioned Ida B. Wells, and the People's Grocery Store is right in South Memphis. I think the church where Dr. King delivered I've Been to the Mountaintop is even in South Memphis. Can you sort of pull up to the level of a historian and just talk about South Memphis, talk about Knowledge Quest in terms of the history and the present of the civil rights movement in this country?
So that history and legacy is, I share with children, I share with adults. We are literally walking in the footsteps of giants. This is not some philosophical, theoretical experience. This is a literal experience that some of the greatest minds, these matriarchs and patriarchs of the civil rights movement, of the building of America, of building the social fabric, the conscience of America, these political movements where Ida B. Wells was the first to respond not through protest and marching. Ida B. Wells' response was economic. It's something I think that's apropos for us today. Ida B. Wells proposed, say, okay, we have to leave a community that will not honor our rights as individuals and our humanity. And Ida B. Wells pushed for boycotts of the railway and train stations, like save your nickels and dimes. So Ida B. Wells she
Hmm.
responded with an economic response. So we lift up, Dr. King as a champion in his response, but I often lift up Ida B. Wells. These are both strategies and tactics that we need to continue to look to draw inspiration for today. And from that legacy and from its, appropriateness and relativeness and its application in today's context, then we champion ourselves first, and then children and the adults that we come alongside to say, okay, now it's our responsibility. What do we owe because of what's been poured into us, and how do we leave, our mark and leave things better than we found it when it comes to not only South Memphis, but South Memphis' contribution to our city and state, to the nation as a whole.
It's amazing.
I want to ask you, part of what we're doing this season is building a Pathbreakers playbook. We are gathering advice for other change makers like yourself out there about how to make big things happen and how to sustain that work. So I want to ask you, what is a piece of advice that someone gave you along the way that you live by in the work that you do now? And then I also want to ask, what is a piece of advice that you would offer someone doing long-term generational work?
Probably most significant, I would go back to that kid, find you one thing to do that well, and grow from there.
Because you delivered.
Yeah, because you see opportunity, and your greatest opportunity, your greatest gifting is a coin flip, the other side of your greatest challenge. So I think that's a good piece of advice. I would pass that on. We adhere to John McKnight is one of the authors, but his asset-based community development that really stuck with me. That you always start with the assets within neighborhood first, and you only go outside of the neighborhood when you have tapped the resources within neighborhood. So that gets very practical for us. I mean, the person who washes the buses has that contract, the person who does the small engine repair on the farm, the two groups that cut grass. It's like you have to be transferring ownership. We say everybody has to eat. So a few nuggets, I'll pause there, but a few nuggets I definitely love to pass on.
Well, thank you so much, Marlon. If people want to learn more about what you're doing in Memphis, where should they go?
We'd love you to visit our website, knowledgequest.org, knowledgequest.org. Our main campus at 590 Jeanette Place. If you're in the Memphis area, you don't need to call ahead. You don't need an appointment. You can come by and visit us, visit our programs, visit the farm. And, finally, I'd like to say that we're trying to support others in going to do likewise. So if you have interest in from early childhood education to extended learning to family coaching, to an organic farm, we feel like we have a model. We've seen a lot of success from kindergarten readiness to standardized test scores to families making great strides to community level health indicators. And, we're excited about what we're doing in this corner of South Memphis and it having the potential to impact, the nation overall. So we love you to check us out and find out more.
Pathbreakers is produced by the Kresge Foundation. Founded in 1924 with a mission to promote human progress, Kresge today works to expand equity and opportunity in America's cities.
Learn about our grant making and social investing work in Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Fresno, and cities across the U.S. at kresge.org. To hear more stories from the Pathbreakers, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Our producer, as always, is Juliet Heinley. Our managing editor is Krista Yankee. Krista gets huge help from her Kresge colleagues, Maria DiLorenzo, Kate McLaughlin, Jordan Duckins, and of course, my co-host, Tracey Pearson. Our show art is by Alejandro Herrera, logo animation by Colin Likes, and our social media mastermind is David Carrig. Special thanks on this episode to Kresge's American Cities program, and especially Chantel Rush-Tebby and Anand Sharma, and to the Human Services program, especially Dr. Raquel Hatter. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for more from Memphis.